So, as I was sitting down in my room, laying in my bed, playing Shin Megami Tensei 4 for the 3DS, not too long ago, I just found this underrated classic JRPG called Monster Kingdom Jewel Summoner. I started to sit down and realize that true handheld gaming is no longer. Now, before people get upset at me and say, well, what about the ROG Allies, the Steam Decks, and all of that? And I know a lot of you guys may have seen a lot of these videos talking about true handheld gaming, or what I would like to call pocket handheld gaming, is dead. Now, follow along with me. The reason I say true handheld gaming is dead is because there are no longer companies making games specifically catered towards a handheld system, whether that be a downgraded graphical version of a game or it being a completely different game entirely or a spinoff. I know you guys probably remember the days of the DS or the PSP where you thought you were getting a game that was resembling the PS2 or the GameCube version of a game, and then you get it and you're like, wow, what the hell is this? But for some odd reason, you love it. Now, if you're an RPG fan, just like me, then you get these older RPG games and they are amazing. The fact that they're running on a hardware that is not as strong is amazing. And they provide great story, some even great soundtracks. This is an amazing game for a handheld. Now, I know what you guys may be saying. Well, we have evolved. It's the future. We have games now that require so much more power, and who wants to play a downgraded version of a game anyway, or who wants to play a spin-off of a game, or who wants to play a game with the same title but it not be connected to the mainline game in any sort. And I say this is a lost art within gaming. This is a lost form of creativity, of fun, because a lot of things like AAA titles have decided to overtake and overrun the gaming space. There is no incentive to make things that are different due to limitations of a system. And let's take out limitations for a minute. Let's say, okay, we don't need limitations. Let's say we can make a handheld just as strong as a Steam Deck. But even then, you're not getting a game that is completely different that is only for the handheld. Now, I personally do have an issue with exclusive and things like that. So I do understand on one form of that spectrum where it's like, but exclusivity. And also with things like what Nintendo does with their Nintendo eShop. And I don't really have a PS Vita, so I don't know if the PlayStation Store is still up on the PS Vita. All I know is for the PS3, if you try to buy things from the PlayStation Store on the PS3, you have to basically add funds to like the PlayStation wallet, and you have to be logged into your PlayStation 3 account and then buy a game. So I don't really know if it's the same with the PS Vita. I can't personally speak on that until later down the road because I do plan on getting a PS Vita and a PSP. But all I can tell you right now is for the Nintendo eShop is a prime example. You cannot buy anything from the Nintendo eShop on a 3DS. And what makes this even worse is the fact that if there's downloadable content or if there's eShop only games, which Nintendo had a good bit of for whatever reason, if there's digital only games, you cannot buy them. You cannot purchase them unless you mod your 3DS or you buy a modded 3DS, which will cost you a hefty buck. And even then, buying a regular 3DS unmodded will call you a good bang for your buck too. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. So, but back on to the topic at hand of true handheld gaming. A lot of the times, I think we tell ourselves that this new era of handheld gaming is amazing. The fact that we have the Steam Decks, the fact that we have the ROG Allies, and even with the handheld emulation, game consoles. Now, in my honest opinion, I will take a handheld emulation game console over a Steam Deck. That may be an unpopular opinion, which a lot of people may not agree with, but my reason and example is because a lot of handheld gaming is supposed to be more on the cheaper side. Now, before you point that gun at me, put it down. I understand that even emulated handheld consoles are not that cheap. They're still pretty pricey, but they're not as pricey as a Steam Deck. Now, there are some that can get up to that price, but I truly believe if you're buying a handheld emulation console for $400 plus, that's a little bit insane. At that point, you might as well get a Steam Deck, but I do understand because of the power of the handheld emulation console. But again, these mini computers or these mini home consoles are not handhelds. The Nintendo Switch, no matter what Nintendo sells it as, is not a handheld console. Now, you may be like, well, the light. But even then, I would not consider the light a handheld because it's not pocketable. Well, I mean, it is pocketable to some degree, right? But it's not pocketable and as convenient as a regular handheld that just has a flat, nice, smooth surface. You can either go with the clamp method of the DS or the PS Vita method. Now, obviously, the PS Vita and the PSP weren't as pocketable either because of the joysticks. So you could argue, well, you're a hypocrite, and that's kind of ironic because you couldn't even put the PSP in your pocket. But the thing is at least if you wanted to put the PSP in your pocket, it wouldn't look too crazy. So that is my justification. It may be the stupidest and dumbest justification, but that is my justification. Right? Now, these mini computers, though, also do not give a company an incentive to make anything really different. Like, yes, maybe change optimization, make it optimized for that system. Maybe if you have one on the more cheaper side, you got to turn down some graphics and things like that. But other than that, you're getting the same game that you could get on your $1,000 plus PC, or you're getting the same game that you can get on your $500, $800 plus gaming console. You're not getting anything that is like a different perspective. The way I look at a lot of these handheld games, especially me going back and playing more classic games, is that you're getting a different perspective of the games in general. Now, there are some things like Final Fantasy Tactics and stuff like that that may not have been that different, or they made quality of life changes. But other than that, you're not getting anything really different outside of those very few outliers, right? Final Fantasy Tactics or any other classical Final Fantasy game on a handheld that got released for an older generation Nintendo system or anything like that. I believe, though, that true handheld gaming, if it were to come back, it would have to bring in a market that is also dead. A form of handheld games that are completely different. And I feel like before you guys think, oh, this is just going to be a video about nostalgia and reminiscing about handheld games, you're wrong. I feel like I somewhat have a solution. Now, this may not be a end all be all or a very good solution to begin with, but just stay with me here. I feel like the solution to handheld gaming, if handheld gaming were to come back, and I mean true handheld gaming, would to be to introduce a lot of indie titles. A lot of these indie makers who are making indie PS1 graphical type games or indie 2D RPG type of games, any indie developer, right, that probably doesn't have a big budget, I feel like a handheld would be a good way to put their game on something that can get people exclusively looking at just that. A bunch of these indie titles. Now, obviously, you would probably have to have a person with a lot of money, which I don't have, to get the hardware for a handheld, to look at designs for a handheld, to talk to companies or publishers, or I mean just devs in general, to get them and sell the product to them, and like, hey, I promise you, if you put your game on our console, it will sell, it will get eyes, you will get profit off of this, you will be able to grow as a dev through our console. There's a lot of politicking and business things that I do not have the knowledge of, so I cannot sit here and give people a rundown on how they have to run their business. But I do believe that if handheld gaming were to come back, the solution to this would be to introduce a lot of indie developers to that console and to persuade them to get their games or to put their games on that console. There's so many games out here. Now, obviously, you would have to weed out the slop in terms of people just making quick cash grab games. My fault. People making quick cash grab games, or people just making games that are the same because they see that the format is working, like these PS1 games. I don't think a lot of these indie PS1 quality games are horrible, but when you get to that horror section, there's so many horror games that have that PS1 quality VHS tape type of CRT TV type of filter type of vibe to them, and I do not think that that is, you need to put every single one of those games in the store or even make a physical copy. I think another thing is also physical copies, making things back into the card format, which, granted, if you look back at the technology, it's there's limitations, very strong limitations on like a CD or digital format or anything like that. So you would also have to work with that and see how you would get that to work. But I feel like the greatest solution, in my opinion, would be to put a lot of indie games on that. And then who knows, this could start waves in the gaming industry and cause for devs to make their own companies, their own studios, and go crazy and flourish, and then maybe they branch out to things like Xbox and PlayStation. And you may be like, well, then what is the end goal here? If these companies are end up going to getting so big, or if these devs are going to get so big to make their own studio to branch out, then what does that leave for the handheld? Then again, the handheld is dead. Because on a logical aspect, we can understand why handheld gaming is kind of dead. The market for it is really no more, right? Outside of emulation and these handheld emulators, there's not really people asking for handheld games like specifically meant for a handheld. So the market, in a way, is kind of dead. But the end goal is you keep upgrading, you push the limitations. And I know a lot of people may be like, well, the limitations is what we see, the Steam Deck. No. Making a mini computer, that is a game console. Game consoles are just gaming PCs that are specifically manufactured towards gaming, and have limitations that a PC really doesn't have, so you can just focus on the gaming aspect and it be most optimized for games. I don't think we have experienced the full potential of a handheld. Now, things that push the limitations of handhelds, like the PSP, like the DS, things we have seen, games we have seen that have pushed the limitations, I feel like we have scratched nothing but the surface. I believe that handheld gaming could be exceeded beyond without touching the PC aspect or the PC element. And by PC element, I mean these very, very high end games that basically run on a console can run there. And I'm not telling people that they need to dumb down their games or to make their games less playable or less appetizing. No, but I do think that there was a hidden love or a hidden appreciation for the way that handheld gaming was, despite the fact of it not always being on par with console gaming. But a lot of people also were not looking for handheld games to be on par. If you were an adult, at least you would just want to save up until you got the PS2, PS3, or the Xbox, the original one, the Xbox 360 or Nintendo Wii. If you were a child, yeah, you may not have been in luck. Luckily for me, I didn't always have that situation. There were times where I had both a handheld version and a home console, so I didn't really have that struggle. But I do know, and I have heard of people's stories who have had that struggle. So I understand your pain, to some degree. Uh, but again, I feel like handheld gaming needs to come back, and you guys should let me know. If you believe that handheld gaming should come back, or what, or do you think it should be where it's at.